have always considered our school to be exemplary: cameras in the corridors, metal detectors at the entrance, monthly exercises in case of a shooting. Everything changed that Tuesday when Mrs. Clark, the chemistry teacher, ran into the classroom with a face the color of school chalk. Lockdown. Her scream cut through the silence. This is not a drill. We froze. Someone dropped the phone, and the thud of the case hitting the floor startled half the class. Then everything began to spin: the sirens trill, the rumble of closing doors, the tramp of hundreds of feet behind the wall. My friend Ethan reached under his desk, as he was taught, but Mrs. Clark abruptly grabbed his arm. No. The new protocol is to barricade ourselves in the back room. She was referring to the tiny room behind the office where the reagents were stored. The door was armored, after the arson incident last year. We squeezed 23 people like sardines into a space the size of an elevator. Mrs. Clark took a bunch of keys out of her pocket, but her hands were shaking so much that the metal rang like maracas. "Where's the guard?" Emily whispered, clutching her biology textbook to her chest. "Good question. Mr. Jenkins, our 2-meter-tall gargoyle with a hip pistol, was supposed to patrol the corridors. But this morning I saw him arguing with the director at the locker rooms, red face, clenched fists. Phones on silent." Mrs. Clark fumbled in the dark for the light switch. The lights went out. Through the crack under the door, I saw a shadow flash by. Someone quickly passed by. He wasn't running, he was walking. Slowly, slowly. Ethan tugged at my sleeve. "Did you hear that?" At first, I thought it was the rumble of trash cans from the air conditioner. Then the sound was repeated. Clear, metallic. It's like someone. He's reloading his weapon. The back room smelled of sweat and bleach. Someone was crying softly. Mrs. Clark pressed a finger to her lips, pointing at the ventilation grate above us. Voices were coming from there. 3 classrooms on the 2nd floor did not confirm the evacuation. Damn, they have to have a system. Suddenly, a booming impact from above startled everyone. Something was dragged through the ventilation, heavy, bulky. A drop of warm liquid fell on my neck. I touched my fingers. It was sticky and smelled of copper. Blood? Ethan flashed his phone screen at my palm. Mrs. Clark abruptly turned it off. But we've already seen the red spots on her blouse, the drops on the cement floor. There was a screeching sound from above, as if a slab were being moved. Then a voice that I recognized immediately. Mr. Jenkins, but another. Calm, almost affectionate. "I know you're here. Come out with your hands up." Emily bit her lip until it bled. I remembered how she complained about Jenkins yesterday. He detained her at the metal detector, searched her backpack for half an hour, accidentally touching her chest. "It's a trap," Mrs. Clark hissed. "Protocol forbids guards." The roar of a gunshot is somewhere close. Glass shattered in the hallway. Then another one, this time at our door. The bullet left a fist-sized dent. "The police are already in the building," someone shouted from outside. But Jenkins' voice cut through the noise. "They won't help you." I turned off the cameras. In the silence, someone's phone rang. My mom. A notification appears on the screen. "School 12. The security system has been restored. Stay where you are." That's a lie. Mrs. Clark snatched out her phone. "It's an automatic message, that's it." The door to the classroom burst open. The door to the classroom swung open so abruptly that the wind extinguished the flickering fluorescent lights. We huddled against the walls of the back room. Through the crack under the door, I saw a shadow, broad shoulders, familiar boots with metal socks. Jenkins. "Mrs. Clark," his voice sounded like oil oozing from a cracked barrel. "You're violating protocol. The students should be in the classrooms." He took a step, and something heavy dragged behind him on the floor. A metallic rasp, like a chain. With a trembling hand, Mrs. Clark groped for a bottle of nitric acid on the shelf. The label, dangerous, flickered in the light from the hallway. You knew, she hissed, clutching the bottle to her chest. About last year's complaint. Last spring, a 10th grader accused Jenkins of harassment. The case was covered up by the director, lack of evidence. A month later, the girl transferred to another school. Complaints? Jenkins laughed, and the sound was worse than a gunshot. I was protecting you. From drug dealers at the gym, from guns in backpacks. And you. His shadow bent down, and I saw him pick up something long and narrow. A rifle? No. The tire iron. You put cameras in the locker room, Emily said suddenly loudly. Everyone froze. Not for safety. You've been watching. The silence hung like a noose. Then Jenkins hit the microscope cabinet with a tire iron. Glass rained down. Open the door, he said evenly, but the tire iron was shaking in his hand. Or I'll tell the police how you started the shooting in the chemistry lab. Mrs. Clark turned pale. A year ago, her son was admitted to the clinic with paranoia. He claimed that classmates were planning an attack. Everything was attributed to a mental breakdown. You planted a gun on him, her whisper was barely audible. To the director. So that the director understands who the real threat is here, Jenkins hit the door handle. The lock cracked. Open it. Or I'll call your wife, Ethan. I'll say that you tried to hit me, Ethan gasped. His father is a police sergeant. 3 months ago, he broke his son's arm for disrespect. My phone vibrated in my pocket. Text message from an unknown number. The window in office 12B is not blocked. 5 minutes. I nudged Emily, showing her the screen. She nodded, slowly taking off her sneakers. We surrender. Mrs. Clark suddenly shouted. I'm opening it. She took a step towards the door, but instead of the key, she threw a bottle of acid towards the window. The glass hissed as it dissolved, revealing a black rectangle of night. Run! She screamed, grabbing the next bottle. We rushed to the breach, burning our hands on the edges of the glass. Jenkins roared, breaking down the door. Emily was the first to climb out onto the ledge. The wind was in my face, 3 meters down to the lawn. Jump! Ethan shouted, but she froze, staring at something to her left. A man in black was clambering up the wall, clinging to a drain pipe. A shoulder bag, a flashlight on his forehead. Not the police. A medic? Help me! I shouted, but the stranger abruptly raised a finger to his lips. An engine roared from below. An unmarked van. A gun flashed through the open door. Jenkins kicked down the door. His hand with the tire iron reached for my ankle. The tire iron bit into the sole of my sneaker, but Ethan yanked on my arm and I slipped out of the shoe. We collapsed onto the lawn, mingling with the spirea bushes. The van lurched towards us, its headlights burning out the darkness. Let's run to the gym. Emily pulled me after her, but the stranger jumped down from the pipe and blocked the way. I could see him now, camouflage pants, a black balaclava, and a tattoo of a snake wrapped around a dagger on his neck. He pulled a pistol with a silencer out of his bag and motioned for us to lie down. Don't move, he hissed. You're playing by my rules. Mrs. Clark's scream came from the broken window above. Jenkins threw her body onto the ledge. She hung on to the gutter, clinging with bloody fingers. Do you need a living witness? Jenkins leaned out of the window, waving her phone. Or would you prefer her to tell you about your experiments? The stranger cocked the trigger, but the van braked sharply 3 meters away from us. A man in a leather jacket, the headmaster of our school, got out of the cockpit. He dropped the keys on the asphalt. The police have blocked the eastern exit. The world has turned upside down. The director, who was lecturing us on morality, was standing next to an armed bandit. Jenkins went down the fire escape, dragging Mrs. Clark with him. You were selling passes, Emily panted with rage. I've seen the list. Who did you allow to carry weapons? A year ago, the director introduced paid VIP passes to bypass metal detectors. My parents whispered that it was a way to launder money, but there was no proof. Not a weapon, silly, the director took out a cigarette. Contraband. Medicines, vaccines. The fact that cocaine has become more expensive after the pandemic. He nodded at the stranger, and he aimed at my forehead. The choice is simple. Jenkins threw Mrs. Clark at our feet. Her collarbone was broken. Or you heroically died by stopping an armed maniac. Or he took out a dictaphone. You admit that you planned the attack yourself. Your parents will believe the voice. Ethan began to sob. I remembered his father, a sergeant who believed in tough love. If he hears the recording. And if we agree? Emily asked, unexpectedly firm. The director chuckled. You will become our eyes at school. Report suspicious conversations. And for this, he tossed us 3 bundles of $100 bills. Pocket money. A siren wailed in the silence. Police. Jenkins cursed and nodded at the stranger. We clean the tracks. They ran to the van, but the director remained, looking at us with a cold smile. Decide quickly. The cameras will be here in 5 minutes. Mrs. Clark whispered through her broken teeth. Don't believe it. They will kill. Emily picked up the wad of money, tore it open, and threw it into the wind. I'm not your dog. The director sighed and took out his pistol. The shot didn't go off. Instead, the air exploded with the roar of sirens and blinding beams of searchlights. Police cars crashed into the gate, crushing the fence. The director jumped back, hiding the gun in his belt, his face contorted with panicked rage. Put your hands behind your head. Immediately. The megaphone drowned out the wind. But we didn't move. Ethan stared at his father, who ran out of the first car in full SWAT gear. Sergeant Barlow froze when he saw his son in a blood-stained shirt with a pistol at his temple. My son. His voice cracked. Drop the weapon. He didn't shoot. Emily shouted, stepping between them. It's them. The director, Jenkins, them. You're lying. The director raised his hands, feigning shock. They attacked the school. They have a bomb in the gym. The police guns wavered, coming at us. One of the officers grabbed the handcuffs. No. Mrs. Clark rose to her knees, her voice hoarse with pain. The receipt, check out the van. Jenkins, who was hiding behind the wheel, rushed to the driver's door. 3 shots, the tires sagged, but the van jerked, dragging the rims on the asphalt. A cardboard box fell out of the truck, scattering ampoules with pink liquid. X-17 is a vaccine, I whispered, remembering the headlines from the band report. An experimental drug that was withdrawn from clinics due to fatal side effects. Sergeant Barlow frowned, picking up 1 ampoule. His gaze met the director's, and understanding flashed in it. It's clear, he nodded to the officers. Detain the children for questioning. Father. Ethan took a step forward, but the sergeant drew his taser. Stay back. Emily grabbed my hand. We retreated to the gym, 5 policemen in bulletproof vests clutching the ring. Escape? I whispered. She pointed to the upper window. There, behind the bars, the red light of the live camera flashed. Our school YouTube channel. They didn't turn off the broadcast from the morning training camp. Her smile was sharper than a blade. It's all written down. The director understood first. He ran to the sergeant. Shoot. Right now. But Sergeant Barlow lowered his taser. His face, always so hard, twitched. My son. He's not lying. Cotton. A drone with a camera fell from the roof of the gym. The news channel's logo flickered on his tablet screen. The chat exploded with messages. What's going on? Is this real? Live broadcast, I exhaled. You connected it. Emily took out a mini transmitter from her pocket, a gift from her hacker brother. In case Jenkins gets into my backpack. The director rushed to the van, but he was knocked down. Jenkins, realizing that he had lost, pulled out a knife and rushed to Emily. You've ruined everything. Sergeant Barlow moved forward, shielding his son with his body. The knife went into his shoulder, but he pinned Jenkins down in one motion. It's over, he hissed, snapping the handcuffs shut. That's it. But when the police led us to the cars, I saw the director whispering something in the sergeant's ear. He nodded, too quickly. Emily noticed it too. They won't give up. They have their own people everywhere. Mrs. Clark, who was being loaded into an ambulance, waved weakly at us. She clutched a broken phone in her palm. The microphone recording was still working. If we talk, they'll destroy the evidence. I felt reality shift again. Who should I trust? The police? Parents? Suddenly, a woman in a formal suit approached us, a federal agent, judging by the badge. You need to disappear. She held out 3 train tickets. Until they come up with new identities for you. And if we refuse? Emily asked. The agent chuckled. Then you will become heroes. But keep in mind, heroes don't live long. The train sped through the night, wheels clattering to the beat of my thoughts. Emily was asleep, pressed against the glass, and Ethan was endlessly rebooting his phone, checking to see if it had been hacked. The tickets were on the table, 3 different cities, 3 new names. Martha, David, Carol. Other people's lives in an envelope stamped top secret. We need to talk. I broke the silence by taking a flash drive out of my backpack. The one that Mrs. Clark shoved into my hand while the ambulance was taking her away. Folders popped up on the laptop screen, payslips, contacts, school 12, 17, 34. The director was just a pawn. There was a network behind him, pharmaceutical companies, officials, even a couple of congressmen. X-17, the vaccine was tested on students through school canteens. Side effects? Seizures, psychosis, 2 died of blood clots. All cases were closed as accidents. They were experimenting on us. Emily woke up and stared at the screenshot of the menu marked Supplement V17. Do you remember how sick everyone was in October? Ethan covered his face with his hands. My sister. She fell in the gym. The doctor said it was epilepsy. The phone rang in the silence. Unknown number. I pressed the speakerphone. You think you're going to run away? The voice has been processed, but the threat is real. Your parents have already received the letters. Condolences on your death in an accident. Emily gripped the armrest. Mom. If you get off the train at the next stop, they are alive. If not, a photo popped up on the screen. Her mother was shopping for groceries, and a man in a black cap was watching her. The connection was interrupted. Ethan opened the map. It was 8 hours to the final station. It's a trap, Emily whispered. They know that we will not abandon our family. Or so they want us to think. I scrolled through the contacts folder. There was a familiar code among the numbers. The children's hospice where Ethan's sister was lying. They're everywhere. He punched the wall. Even if we go back, they'll kill us. If we escape, they'll kill them. The lock clicked in the bathroom. We froze. A conductor shuffled through our carriage. A snake-shaped pin flashed on his lapel. The same tattoo as the mercenary in the balaclava. We need a plan, Emily said, pulling an emergency hammer from under the seat. The Fed's documents are fake. They want us to trust them, and then. The train slowed down as it entered the tunnel. The windows were plunged into darkness. I heard the door creak at the end of the carriage. Footsteps. Not a guide. Over here. Ethan peeled off the panel under the sink. Ventilation shaft. We got inside when a man with a knife came into the bathroom. His shadow slid across the mirror. I know you're here, he laughed. Did you like our lessons? The mine took us to the baggage car. Bags, boxes, the smell of mold. Emily came across a box with the logo of school number 17. Inside are the same X-17 ampoules. They're transporting the vaccine over the railroad. I photographed the shipment. So, other schools too. The crash. The door to the carriage was blown off its hinges. Our pursuer with a knife, followed by 2 masked men. Let's run to the roof. Ethan shouted, breaking the emergency exit lock. The wind hit my face. The train was rushing over a bridge over a stormy river. There are rocks and foam below. Jump? Emily looked at me. There is a chance. No, I pointed to a helicopter with a camera hovering on the left. TV channel. Live broadcast. We are giving interviews. Here and now. Masked people climbed out onto the roof. The knives flashed in the spotlight. The camera. Emily tore off her jacket, revealing the scars from the vaccination. Look at this. They did it. Schools have been turned into laboratories. The helicopter approached. The knife was thrown at me, but it ricocheted off the pipe. One of the mercenaries pulled out a pistol. Shoot. Stop it, he shouted. You are live. The camera zoomed in on his face. Millions of viewers saw him aiming at children. Shot. The bullet missed. The gun was shaking in his hand. From above came the roar of engines, police helicopters. The mercenaries retreated to the edge. It's over. I shouted, but they smiled. Is it over? One of them pulled out a detonator. We have mined the tunnel ahead. Choose between your life or hundreds of passengers. The train raced towards a dark hole in the rock. The detonator in the mercenary's hand was flashing red, in sync with his heartbeat. The train crashed into the tunnel, and the walls closed over us like jaws. In the last rays of light, I saw Ethan rushing forward, grabbing his explosive arm. Don't let him. Emily screamed, clinging to the ventilation grate to keep from falling. We fell into a pile. The knife slipped out of the mercenary's hands and flew off into the darkness. The detonator rolled under the seat. Helicopter searchlights picked out our silhouettes from the darkness. Millions of eyes were watching the fight live. The tunnel. Emily stared at her watch in horror. 30 seconds before the explosion. The mercenary pulled away, his fingers clutching the detonator. Ethan slammed his head against the metal rail. A muffled groan, blood on the glass. How to stop it? I hovered over the buttons, but the instructions were in Cyrillic. Someone's hands from the past, my father, who taught me Russian before the divorce. Fittings. The cancellation system. Red toggle switch. Emily screamed, but I had already pulled the lever. Silence. Then a crash, but no explosion. The emergency brakes whined, and sparks lit up the tunnel. We were thrown forward, and Emily hit her head against the wall. The train stopped, frozen half a meter away from the explosives. They're alive. Ethan held up the flashlight. The mercenary was lying unconscious, his arm trapped under the wreckage of the seat. But the ether has already done its job. Notifications flashed on phones. School scandal. Networks are involved in experiments on children. Parents, journalists, and bloggers all demanded answers. They'll find us, Emily whispered, wiping the blood from her temple. But those who are behind it, they won't give up. Footsteps came from the tunnel. Dozens of lanterns. The police? The feds? Or their people? Hands in plain sight. A familiar voice. Sergeant Barlow came out of the darkness, but now without armor, in civilian clothes. Behind him is a crowd of parents with phones and homemade posters. Bring back our children. Father. Ethan took a step forward, but the sergeant lowered the gun. I'm not your father. Your father would have died for the truth. He tossed him a bunch of keys. The van is at the exit. Go to your sister. Emily grabbed my hand. It's a trap. They want us to escape, and then people will decide that we are criminals. I looked at my parents. They were crying, hugging each other, but some of them looked at us with anger. Why did you stay alive, but our children? Sergeant Barlow came up close. Run away. Before they changed their minds. We crawled along the train, but a scream stopped us. Traitors. A woman with a photo of her son in her hands threw a can of paint at us. You knew everything and were silent. The paint got into Emily's face. She didn't wipe it off. We weren't silent, her whisper was picked up by the cameras. But you weren't listening. The van turned out to be an old Toyota with fake license plates. There are passports, money, and a pistol with one cartridge in the trunk. Ethan got behind the wheel, his hands shaking. Where to? He turned the key. Back to where it started. I took Mrs. Clark's flash drive out of my pocket. There was a label on it, the coordinates of the laboratory where X-17 was created. We'll destroy everything. Emily buckled her seatbelt. Every sample. Each document. But when the engine roared, a black Jeep without license plates flashed in the mirror. Behind the wheel is the agent with glasses, the one who suggested that we disappear. They're coming for us, I said, clutching the flash drive to my chest. So we're on the right track. The Jeep accelerated. The Jeep crashed into our bumper, knocking the Toyota into the oncoming lane. Ethan pulled onto the dirt road, kicking up columns of dust. The laboratory loomed in the distance, an abandoned warehouse with bars on the windows. We're going in through the back gate. Emily flashed the map on her phone. There's a loading area. We flew into a dilapidated hangar. Inside there are rows of refrigerators with X-17 ampoules, server racks, an operating room with dried blood on the tables.